forgot to hit the record button. Sorry for that. Okay.
Right.
All
so
right, so
hopefully you can see the slides, right?
yes.
Perfect. Okay, so this is actually a paper that we drafted a couple of months ago. This is a co-authored paper with Dr. Dimitris Spinotsis, who's based at the MIT. And I'm very happy to say that this is perfect timing for us because the paper is just out. It's been less than a week that the paper has been published at the International Review for Low Computers and Technology. And I will be going through the main points that we're trying to make, and then I would be more than happy to get your feedback because we're actually working on certain areas on this paper for one or two future papers. So I will start off in a rather unconventional way. I know that when you actually meet someone from Europe and they start discussing about data protection, then obviously you expect them to be overprotective of data given the GDPR. So I'll do quite the opposite, and I will be asking you, I do know that you don't really know any of these chaps, Sean Buckles or Federico Zanier, but how much would you actually be willing to pay to obtain data from these two chaps? I'm taking offers. So Sean Buckles is offering his personal records, his location track records, his train track records, his thoughts even, whatever that might be, his online conversations, and his consumer preferences. So now you get a better understanding of what's up for offer. And that sold for 350 euros, not much, if you ask me, given the value that this might have if that was part of a larger data set. And Federico Zanier, on the other hand, did a bit better. He sold for this much. And that's a very short video where he explains how come he actually thought that he would be better off selling his privacy instead of protecting this.
Yeah. A bite of me. Oh, we can't hear the audio.
Oh, you can. Just give me a second. Let me see. Hear it now?
Yeah.
And here is all of my own data. Yeah. Since February, I violated my own privacy. And I recorded my online activity, which includes the website I visit, what I post, the video I watch, what I buy, my emails, my chats, and more. I've generated so far 1.5 gigabytes of text, which is equivalent to 1,500 books. And I've taken 30,000. Meanwhile, corporations have been using my data for their own profit. They use and they sell my data. Often, we don't understand that by signing the term of services, we give away the rights to all our own data. In 2012, in the US, the ad revenues was $30 billion. In 2013, the estimates are for $40 billion. In 2012, I personally made $0. So, is my personal data worthless to me? I'm selling my data for $2. For $2, you get an entire day's worth of data bundled in a single folder, which includes the website I visit, an image of my face looking at the computer taken every 30 seconds, a screenshot of the page that I was looking at, my GPS location, the position of my mouse, and a log of the application that I was using. Your contribution will give you access to my data and will allow me to finish a browser extension and an iPhone app that allows you to do the same. If more people do the same, one day marketers might pay us for our own data. If you're interested in selling your own data and turn them into profit, please support this campaign. Thank you for your support.
Right. So I hope you know. Yes.
It was a
Can
little
you
bit
hear
hard
me
to
now?
understand, but I think we got the general idea.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, yes, yes, great. And yes, yes, yes. It's just that I'm switching through different systems, so that's why I'm asking you. So the point here is that you can actually generate profit for yourself by selling your data, by giving up your right to privacy. And if you're not really sure how to do that, well, there is of course an app for that. One of my favorite ones, the one that I chose to make a point here, is my Handshake, which actually is the equivalent of, you would say, an eBay, an online market where you ask for specific prices based on the data that you're willing to offer, and then you negotiate, you accept the offer or not. Only one thing is certain: you can actually generate profit for your own data, and you can even profit yourself from monitoring your data. So this is something quite different. In that case, you're not really monetizing your personal data as such, but by being able to monitor your online activities, by being able to draw a pattern, and in this case, this is what Controlio, if I'm not mistaken, this is a UK-based startup. So what they effectively do is that they monitor your online activities for you, and then they issue you with a monthly report, which gives you a better understanding of yourself, really. This is a rather unconventional way to start discussing about, because it stretches beyond the strict confinements of privacy. And of course, it's relevant to what sort of data that is. And this is where things get a bit more complicated, because if we no longer are discussing about personal data, so if you're no longer discussing about data that can actually identify a person, then we might be looking outside the box of data protection, the GDPR, for example, in the European, and that's the best example I can come up with. And once we bring in some other parameters, such as cloud computing, and where all these data sets are being stored, these shady people that no one really knows, and we call them data brokers, and of course large data sets that do not consist of one set of data that can actually identify one user, but data that have been collected by having been mined by many users. Then what we have is a mosaic that can be utilized further. And I was really happy to listen to one of the final questions for the previous presenter, because that's exactly the point. How can all these large data sets generate more value? And in this case, how can they actually be used as raw material for machine learning, or the set it and forget it type of automation, as we refer to that in the paper. So when we say paper, the main point for us had been to actually understand what are the different ways of thinking about automated decision making, and whether we can actually we can actually start discussing about human-like autonomous agents as such. And we started off by looking at a report that was published in 1973. This goes back in time, obviously. And at the time, the Science Research Council in the UK had commissioned Sir James Lighthill, who was a professor of applied mathematics at Cambridge at the time, to write his own views as to how the progress of artificial intelligence could be assessed. And the Lighthill report outlines three separate yet intertwined areas of artificial intelligence. And these can be really outlined in the following: advanced recognition. This also includes pattern recognition, for example. Computer-based research. This refers to computer simulations modeling mainly neurophysiological theories. and last but not least, robotics, namely automatic devices that can actually mimic human functions. And in his findings, mind you, that was back in 1973, what Lighthill pretty much tells us is that if this is a simple task, then everything should be okay, and we can actually rely on machine learning as such. But when we actually have to deal with the so-called issue of combinatorial explosion, meaning when we have a wealth of possible different states and the system has to choose between them, that's when we have to resort to heuristics. It is really the programmer's intelligence that takes over and saves the day for us and helps the machine ultimately deal with this issue of having to choose between many different scenarios. Now, as I said, and I will be repeating this, that was back in 1973. Lots of things have changed since then. So moving fast forward to 2016, and I'm pretty sure that you are all familiar with the unfortunate case of Microsoft's chatbot Tay.ai. I will very, very briefly mention for the benefit of those among you that might not have heard the story so far. So Microsoft was very excited to be launching their AI chatbot, and they did so several months back. It launched on Twitter, and the whole point was that Tay, that's the name of the chatbot, was there to interact and learn with different Twitter users. So things turned ugly pretty quickly, and Tay started mimicking human behavior. So unavoidably, she started producing xenophobic tweets that included hate speech, and so on and so forth. I have included a few in the slide, but I have to say that this was very problematic for Microsoft, and they actually had to deactivate Tay's account on Twitter in a matter of hours. However, having discussed this personally with Microsoft's staff as well, and this is also my personal view, this is far from something that could be considered a failure. This is quite the opposite. It is actually a successful case of generating a fully automated system, in this case, a chatbot. And this is because it actually performed as it ought to. So it essentially mimicked human behavior online, whether we like the results or not, obviously. So this is something that use, and this is something that we refer to it in the paper as a significant empirical evidence that, contrary to the Lighthill report back in the 70s, what we now have is the ability of automated systems to fully mimic human behavior. And this poses many legal challenges. I will not be exploring all of them in the given limited time that I have, but I've just summarized them here for reference on this slide. So we are faced with conceptual legal challenges, such as what is really the standard of foreseeable action when we're dealing with an automated system, how we can perceive causality in tortious liability, and so on and so forth. Definitional issues as well, posed mainly by the difficulty in being able to differentiate between what is a product and what is a service when we're dealing with fully automated systems. Think, for example, the virtual personal assistants such as Siri, Cortana, Alexa, and then, of course, something that has been discussed thoroughly in literature so far, the issues that are within the scope of rule of law and due process, and more specifically, algorithmic accountability. But what we touch on in this paper is actually the axiomatic legal challenges that have been posed by this technological advancement in artificial intelligence. And by that, we refer to the fact that when you're dealing with an automated system that bears anthropomorphic features and is based on interactivity, then you can't really ignore the fact that you should start considering whether the whole notion of personhood as such is something that should be reconfigured. And when we actually wrote the paper, this was just an idea, but I was very happy to see that while we were actually editing the paper, so we couldn't really add to it, and that's something that's missing from the paper, and we're considering perhaps a follow-up. So during these months, we actually saw one or two proposals, if I'm not mistaken, by some European MPs, where you actually have the question as to whether there should be this so-called concept of electronic personality or electronic personhood for reserved for these fully autonomous systems. But putting this aside for a while, what we focused on the paper was really the fact that we need to actually realize that when we are discussing automated systems, when we are discussing about machine learning, the main challenge that we need to overcome is, first of all, the fact that there is no one size fits all. So yes, it is opaque. Yes, sometimes for a very good reason, but it also includes lots of different degrees of interaction between the human element and the machine, human involvement in the outcome of the automated decision-making process. So that's one thing that we're frequently missing when we're trying to legally assess these outcomes. And the second aspect that we seem to be leaving out of the picture, at least for now, is that there is also the procedural task to mimic human behavior, to learn from the experience gained by drawing a pattern, by monitoring human behavior online. And this is something, again, that we fail to fully perceive, given the fact that we refer often to it with unfortunate terms such as the black box. So in this paper, we actually tried to open this black box. And this is pretty much how the paper is set out. So we proceeded in two parts. The first part had to do with taking a case study to explore further what are the different and separate layers of interaction between the user and the artificial agent. And the best example for us in this case would have to be the driverless vehicles, where we were actually able to establish that there are indeed various levels of human-machine interactions, ranging from fully automated to assisted and to actions taken mainly by the driver with minimum assistance by the automated system. And then we asked ourselves, well, is there anything new here? And I have to say that automation as such does not pose something new. So we've pretty much left horse-led carriages in the past, almost a century ago. But it's not the automation that should be striking us as odd, but it's actually the several degrees of automation. So this is pretty much what we should be considering, instead of just focusing on how automated a certain system might be. And as far as the second point goes, yes?
Yeah, I was just wanted to ask you to leave a little bit of time for questions. You have about 2 more minutes, and I wanted to see if there's any questions. So if
thank you. I'll wrap up. I'm almost done.
Ahead.
So the second point was about the process, and that's pretty much the most interesting point, if you ask me, about this paper. So we tried to analyze what is the novelty in having a system that's able to mimic human decisions, even when it might actually be given the power to take decisions on behalf of the operator and even override the operator's wishes if need be, although that's not really the case with driverless vehicles as far as I know. And the novelty there is that we used to have such systems, for example, when you're discussing unmanned aerial vehicles. So there's nothing new here as such. the novelty is that unlike the unmanned aerial vehicles, these systems are now designed to actually facilitate human use. So we care about the driver's life. We care about the safety as well, which was not really the rationale with unmanned aerial vehicles. This is something that I will not be focusing because I explained so far. And my last point would have to be that we are discussing deep learning as the word says, and I have to apologize for my limited technical background because I have been relying on that, on my co-author's knowledge. So these slides actually are drafted by Dimitris from now on, and I would not really have much to offer other than just reading through the slides. But there's one thing that I'd like to highlight, that there are different layers of machine learning. That was implied by the word deep, and they have also several applications. So we need to be cautious when we are discussing machine learning as such, because as I said earlier on, there is no one size fits all. The main question that we were faced with, and this is something that came up towards the end of our study, and this is the question that I would actually like to pose to you and perhaps spark up some further discussion, is given the fact that they do seem to be able to mimic human behavior in a dynamic manner, given different circumstances and the ability to choose through many different parameters, do we actually need to reconsider our concept of personhood as such? And I am mostly referring to the continental legal aspect of personhood, or at least that's what came to mind when I started looking into this further. And this is something that I would like to listen your views to. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you will enjoy for more information on what I've just discussed briefly.
All right, so are there any questions for Professor Carnasio? We're running a little bit short on time, so you see Professor Carnasio's email address here, so you can always contact her directly to ask any questions. I'm wondering what's the next step for this project? What is the overall kind of objective of the project?
For the time being, this was just a paper. This is just a collaborative project that I had with Dr. Binotis, but there is actually a follow-up step, and this is something that I presented a couple of weeks back at the Internet Works in Progress, which was actually very, very close to where you are right now in Santa Clara. And I discussed parts of the next project, which will be focusing a bit more on which type of data is actually of use to AI, and I'm focusing on so-called neuro data, which has to do with the cognitive and behavioral patterns that is mainly mined by using wearable tech. So that's the next step.
Got it. Cool. Very cool. All right, so I want to, maybe you could ask this. We are running out of time. Maybe you can ask her directly then to.
Just a quick question about MIT's Kate Darling, and I'll email you about it. She wrote an article, or Al-Dahi wrote an article recently, why this robotic ethicists trust technology more than humans. And perhaps Professor Dimitris Pinotis knows of her as well in Cambridge.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Professor Carniasio. Thanks. Great to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I will turn it over to Tucker and Wahid and
Sure.
All right. So let's get your slides up.
Okay. Oh, do I need to click present share screen?
Can I have this for a moment? I'll just close this one here. And then, okay, share screen. It's in.
I think we can do, yeah.
So can you all see? That's it?
I think so. He did the desktop before when he shared it. But if you could.
Oh, it's on a desktop?
No. I mean, I can share it right from the screen here. We can just go to view and present, and I think. Can you see the deck?
Can you all see the deck? From my section? Hello? Anyone still there?
Do that one right above. It says, yeah. Here.
This one?
Yeah. There we go. That should work. And now you just click onto the other tab.
Oh, and is it?
It should just
in
share
Chrome?
full screen. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
I believe that's it.
All right. Well, let us know if you don't see the MyStacks slides now.
Okay, it looks like we're sharing the entire screen. Sure. So how long do we have, just so we know?
Well, so for 20 minutes, we okay. I already said we'll go over time. So,
Okay, thank you.
So we have go ahead, take it away.
So thank you for having us. We're from MyStacks. My name is Tucker Cottingham. This is Fahed Kazvinian and Omid Elyoun. And we are building a AI document drafting assistant. We're a computational linguistics company based out of San Francisco. Sure. So we thought that we'd talk about one particular application of our software and technology, which is specifically the application of our platform in the criminal justice system. And so the outline quickly is that we'll give you some background information about our company, talk a little bit about how criminal records pose a big problem to many people and to the economy, and then how our software and how our technology is affecting the criminal justice system, and then some of the interesting questions that we can answer with some of the data that we're collecting. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'm an attorney and spent several years working at a corporate law firm, kind of growing this corporate law firm. And the way that we ran into this issue was that as we were scaling the law firm, realized that there was this sort of repeating problem, which was we would understand what the legal projects to be completed were, and we didn't have good tools to actually streamline that process. And so in our firm specifically, we were spending a lot of time that was being not billed in legal drafting. And so I was trying to find solutions for specifically to streamline our legal drafting process. And I was sort of amazed that I wasn't able to find good tools. I met with Fahed, and he can give his background.
Yeah, sure. So I met Tucker earlier this year, and he explained to me how he's doing things with drafting, very fragmented, frustrating process. You know, PDFs on one side, some of them are editable, some of them are not. There's Word documents. And we need a solution for this. So the way we thought about it is that we either have a customized solution for Tucker, where we sit down and wire up his documents manually, or we create something that works at scale for different law firms that even beyond legal, and that would require NLP and machine learning. So my background is kind of that I went to graduate school in Michigan, and I studied computer science and natural language processing. And I worked at Google after that for several years. I was in the core search ranking team, where we were looking at large-scale NLP and user intent understanding, which are kind of similar problems in a sense. So after talking with Tucker and understanding that we can solve this problem and have big impact, back in June we started MyStacks, and that's our job.
Cool. And so what we've built is an AI document drafting assistant, and what that is a cloud-based drafting platform that uses our proprietary NLP engine to understand language, and it allows users to be able to actually programmatically upload documents, programmatically convert them into templates, combine them with many other documents, and then draft them simultaneously. So if you make a change in one document, all the other documents adjust accordingly. And so we got this technology developed in the first stages. We said, this is a problem for small firms that are trying to make more money, but this could potentially have big social impact as well. And so we started thinking about areas where we could have a meaningful impact with this technology that turned out to be very powerful. So we can kind of show you really quickly, we'll go quickly, but how it works.
Sure, yes. Just real quick, just to get a sense of how things are done. So this is a sample motion that we've just changed the name that Attorney Tucker Cottingham would draft for defendant Philip Thompson. If we do some very basic NLP analysis on this text, we start understanding a lot about this text. Like we would know that there's a sentence down there because we know that there's a number and there's a duration and it's followed by sentence. We know that there's an attorney name and those pronouns are connected to that attorney name and so forth. So by analyzing this text, we would understand all the variables that are in this text. Now we know that if we change Philip Thompson to Shannon Thompson, then we know that we need to change the rest of the document accordingly. So in terms of our NLP architecture, we collected tens of thousands of legal documents and trained a bunch of models, a large number of models, in fact, that we use to back our core NLP engine. For a new user, they would upload a new Word document or a PDF, and that would go through that core NLP engine, and the output is a smart template that has the variables tagged in it. And then the user would give us certain feedback, and we would put that back into our training model. And we can use the same models to understand how PDFs work. We parse out all the boxes and where the inputs are and the context for those inputs, and use the same models to identify where the defendant name, for instance, is in these PDFs. Now, even though that there's a lot of technology in NLP and tens of thousands of lines of code happening under the hood, the end user experience is extremely simple and intuitive. Basically, we automatically generate a HTML form from a set of forms and templates that the user chooses, in this case 5 documents, and then they would put information in one place, and that information would populate across the stack of documents. In this case, John Doe, attorney name, goes in 11 different places, and they only need to change it in that one place, if there's an error, for instance, or if they initially type.
Yeah, and so this is sort of the basic application, and we realized that that this could be very helpful for a lot of legal aid groups and pro bono attorneys. And so what we found is that users are saving between 50 and 75% of the time that they previously spent drafting legal documents. So the Power Assist has really a lot of meaning for specifically pro bono attorneys, and that's something that we started to get really excited about. And so specifically this idea of expungement. And so an overview of what an expungement is. Basically, the system used to be that you did something wrong, you were given a punishment, you fulfill your punishment, and then you go on with your life. Because of electronic criminal records, that's no longer the case. So after you serve your sentence, you're on good behavior, your criminal record actually follows you for your whole life. And so an expungement is a legal mechanism that allows you to actually hide that conviction from the public. And there's different types of expungements, and there's different names for different legal mechanisms, but we're using expungement broadly to mean any legal process that allows the criminal record to sort of be hidden from the public. This is a really big problem because 70 million people in the United States have criminal records, and more than 70% of employers do background checks when they're hiring. So 70 million people in the U.S. come up as having a criminal record. And it's estimated that these employment barriers due to criminal convictions actually cause the U.S. to lose $60 billion in U.S. GDP, and it affects communities of color more drastically than any other group. And so it was a real problem for individuals and also communities, and then also for the U.S. economy. And so there's been a lot of attention, a lot of progress made on the idea that expungement mechanisms can really help people and can improve economic conditions. And so very recently, we've seen 23 states broaden expungement laws, and we've seen a lot of bipartisan support for ban the box type of movements. And it's really become sort of widely acknowledged that this is a useful mechanism. And in California, below you can kind of see the process. Basically, you get your rap sheet, which is your criminal record. You match with an attorney through some various legal aid groups or public defender offices. And then typically there's a mandatory expungement and a discretionary expungement. If it's mandatory, the court just grants it if you submit the documents. But again, those are 5 different documents that you would need to submit, and you need to fill them out properly. And if it's discretionary, which is the majority of petitions, the judge in each county has discretion whether to grant the petition or not. And
by the way, if I just the news from this morning from the tech conference in Chicago was that ABA President Linda Klein just announced that the LSC eliminated from federal budget.
Wow.
The Legal Services Corporation.
Wow.
So we'll need more of your. So sorry, go ahead, but that's
unbelievable.
We need more folks like you to bring technology to the right groups.
Yeah, and I think also just the economics of law school. You're having less people go out of law school to go do a couple years in some of these clinics, which they used to do more often. Yeah, that's terrifying. So anyway, so our usage has been increasing week over week. We've been seeing a lot of attorneys that work on these types of criminal reduction filings increasing. And so we started thinking, well, this is really awesome that we can help people process more documents and draft more petitions. But we also started realizing that we know a lot about that process from the very beginning. We know about the people who are applying for the convictions. We know about the attorneys that are working with them. We know about their past criminal history. We know about their income because they're often filling out fee waivers. We know about the county that they were convicted in, where they live now, the judge that was presiding at the time of the conviction, and the judge that they're petitioning to now. And so we start to say that we have a lot of information. We can actually start to tell these different stories and kind of animate these stories with real people's information. And as you know, I think a group of students out of Stanford found that the average income was increased by $6,000 in the first year after an expungement. And we think that we're able to actually give a more meaningful study about the economic benefits of receiving an expungement by looking at this big data set and saying, you know, when they filled out the fee waiver, this was their stated income. Now we do some follow-up work and we can figure out how much that's changed. That could be a really powerful tool for policymakers, for example. And I think you can also make a good economic argument to conservatives that this could be helpful. Maybe I'll spend more time thinking about, sounds like. The other idea is that we have this notion of jurisdictional bias. And so if you have 56 counties in California, you have a huge percentage of discretionary petitions. You know, the question is somebody in Southern California who's African American, who's saying that they receive government benefits and has a DUI, as likely as somebody in Santa Clara who's not applying for government benefits and who's maybe, you know, has a white-sounding name? Are they equally as likely to get a petition approved? And so we can actually start to look at sort of some of these jurisdictional bias issues across different districts. And
so the third point that we're really excited about is if there is that bias and we can study that bias, can we use machine learning to fight against that bias? So one of the examples we use is that, or we saw was that one of the Alameda County district attorneys said that the defendant did not seem that the defendant is truly sorry in the petition, and the petition was denied just because of that. So if you're drafting this and you're not a experienced lawyer, can machine help you draft a better petition and increase the chances of success? So for instance, if you're on government benefits and you have this kind of petition with these attributes that Tucker talked about, the machine could tell you, oh, you need 3 letters of support, and one of them should be from the local church. That would increase your chance of success by this much %.
Which are all things that anecdotally we're hearing, because we're going to these expungement clinics all over the state, and we know that a letter from, you know, a pastor is actually, you know, a really positive signal and increases outcomes. But I don't think any court would say that.
You're right.
And then the one final point that we're excited about is that since Lawya is a cloud-based platform, what we're seeing right now is that attorneys are using it online and they're starting to collaborate with each other, creating this network, inherent network between each other, where they pass each other petitions and they, you know, leave notes to each other and they ask for help and so forth. So it can be optimized using this network for better representation. So if you're in rural areas in Fresno and there's one pro bono attorney or public interest lawyer that is just doing mandatory expungement that's overworked, but then there needs to be a petition that is discretionary, can we route that through this network to some other attorneys who are sitting in San Francisco who have more bandwidth, who is free to do that work and who can do a better representation?
Yeah, and the model is sort of upside down because right now, a lot of times, private lawyers come on a Saturday, they'll get on a bus, or they'll drive out to whatever location, it'll be a union hall or a church or a community center, and these places will fill up with people who need expungement filings. But it takes all day. We've done it many times. It takes, 8 hours of your day to go do that. Whereas there are a lot of attorneys, I think, who would be very happy to spend 45 minutes of their day helping process 3 expungements, potentially increasing $20,000 of revenue for a certain community without ever, while they're eating their lunch. And so we see this as a platform that's able to really harness a huge amount of legal power and have a tremendous impact. So two of the kind of interesting issues are privacy, and so there's two layers of privacy, and we gave a talk recently at Media Lab and had a chance to kind of discuss some of these privacy issues in more detail, but we'll just touch on them here, which is that you can create a user license with nonprofits. And we've been giving the expungement module for free to nonprofits, and they've been really happy to collaborate with us. But we also have this issue of individuals that are coming to the clinic. And they're coming to the clinic in a situation where they feel squeezed. I mean, they need these expungements to get jobs. So there's this pressure dynamic, I think, in some ways. And so we really want to be conscious of that and use best practices for how do we explain that process, or how do we communicate, what's actually happening with these people's data. And then also tracking outcomes. Each legal group tends to track outcomes differently. And so creating kind of a consistent method for tracking outcomes so that we have some consistency in the study. And so, we're interested in working on this study. We think we've got an interesting opportunity, and we have willing participants and organizations, and I think it could tell us a lot about how well the criminal justice system is working for different people in different places.
Cool, very cool.
How is that? That was our fast version.
Great, thanks. And this is very impressive. So, so this expungement use case is just a module on your platform. So you're trying to bring that same approach to other areas. That's right. Other practice areas. This is the kind of the non-for-profit use case. Mm-hmm. But the other ones have a different kind of business model.
Exactly. So it's a software as a service. It'll be a platform that private firms and organizations can sign up for, and then they can use our NLP engine to streamline different drafting, and then to learn things about their documents and information in those documents. So it's a whole kind of system that can be applied for for-profit organizations. Uh-huh. And this is just sort of the application.
Do you have some customers already, some for-profit customers, or this is your first?
This is kind of our first module that's been running. We've been really doing it since just the beginning of the year in this context, but we've got several pilot projects going on with different for-profit organizations.
And how much of a how much is it sort of self-service platform versus how much kind of service do you need to provide for people to be able to deploy the system in their
in the legal industry? It's completely self-service.
Completely self-service.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't need to do any customization for legal departments or for lawyers. Cool. Now, if we want to go to these other areas, we need to do more work. Sure. But in its current state. So it's exciting, and I think that one of the bigger points is just that with a lot of the AI technology that's being developed, I think it's, and especially in the legal industry, I think it's really important to keep aware of the human aspect of providing legal services. Yeah. And so this was something that we really intentionally started with to kind of emphasize the way that technology can improve jobs and can actually improve those human experiences. And so trying to incorporate that into our ethos as we go forward.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Great. Other questions?
Anybody left?
Let's see. There you go. Folks online, if you're still there, there's still 10 people there.
Okay.
So, there's somebody chatted.
Okay.
Okay, yes. So
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you see as the main areas in financial compliance that would be first targets for applications?
The main areas for financial compliance.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know that we have a specific main area that I would think of. What do you mean specifically? What would be like an example?
Oh, sorry. I just saw on that last slide it said financial compliance was one of the application areas, and so I was just wondering.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that there's a lot of different aspects of finance that this type of software could be really useful for. But we really haven't dug too deep into that area yet.
I can talk about the technology part. As far as the technology part, I think sort of the message of that slide was that the level of innovative NLP they're applying to this problem is scalable to a lot of other things. It is not legal specific. With a very small amount of training data, we could take our technology and then apply it to another domain, and then use other various sort of models to translate models from legal to finance to real estate to insurance and so forth.
Yeah, and I think it's the understanding the language and context part that's really special and that's exciting. And so for financial compliance, we can have we can sort of solve problems in context. And so I think that there's different aspects of finance that could be super useful for banks and so forth.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Any other questions from folks online? No, then yeah, please join me in thanking the presenter. Thank you. It's been great to have you. Thank you all for coming today. Again, last meeting this quarter. I hope to see you all at Future Law on April 6th.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roland.